Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission. Today we are on the record in case number 8903 regarding the proposed operational budget of the Electric Universal Service Program. This is a program that is administered by the Department of Human Services, their Office of Home Energy Programs. But that program is administered, while administered by OHEP, it's subject to the oversight of the Public Service Commission. This is our annual hearing in this matter. Obviously, for those who are close to the EUSP program, the purpose of this program is to help low-income electric customers reduce and manage their utility costs by creating affordable payments. With COVID upon us, obviously, we're going to be seeing some changes in the need for the program and the use of the program. In prior years, the program hasn't touched all eligible participants, nor would I expect it ever to do so. However, with unemployment in the state at 8% and either climbing or decreasing slightly, there's going to be a whole new class of eligible customers that will seek to take advantage of a relatively limited pot of proceeds. That's a challenge for not only OHEP, but all the parties and the commission that we'll likely be discussing today. This commission hearing was noticed on June the 1st. We received the proposed operational plan of OHEP back on May 29th. And since then, we've received responsive comments from a number of parties, including the commission staff, Maryland Office of People's Counsel, the Exelon Utilities, and most recently, the Retail Energy Supply Association, ESUP. We'll begin today with a presentation by the Department of Human Services OHEP program, Mr. Freeman, who we've seen in previous years. And then we'll follow that by either comments or presentations by the other parties that I just mentioned. We will have a court reporter today transcribing the hearing. To speak, please state and spell your name so we create a clean record. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Freeman, representative from the Office of Home Energy Programs. Mr. Freeman, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek. Thank you so much. Thank you to you and all the commissioners for having us. I wish we could be in person, and someday we will be again soon, but I'm happy to have the chance to put on a tie for once. The name is Bill Freeman, Billfreeman. Once again, I'm the director of the Office of Home Energy Programs with the Department of Human Services. I am going to share my presentation now. If you have any issues seeing it, please do let me know so I can address that. Let me get out of there. Oh, there it is. Apologies. All right. Can you see that, everybody? Just want to make sure we're good.
Mr. Freeman, it looks very good, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you, Chairman Stanek. Again, I appreciate those comments. I think you really succinctly got to the issue we face over the next 12 months. And I'm going to get into our initial response to the emergency and then what we're planning for in terms of ensuring that there's funding available from the various funding sources, how we plan to make sure that we can respond throughout the year. We have not seen the surge yet, but we are anticipating it greatly. And on that note, I do want to start by thanking our local administering agencies throughout the state, the 20 agencies that we work with, both departments of social services and community action agencies and local governments. They've been on the front lines. They've kept the operations going during this initial period. They've continued to process applications straight through, whether they're working partly from home or cycling in and out of the office, ensuring that drop boxes are picked up, ensuring the mail is picked up and processed. It's been quite a challenge in these first few months, but I think all the agencies at this point have a sound operational framework for the pandemic period. So I do want to thank them. I also want to thank the Office of People's Counsel for their comments and their insights throughout the year, as well as the other advocates who help, shine that light on some issues that we may not always be thinking of. I want to thank the utilities for their commentary that was submitted and their partnership throughout the year, everything from outreach to processing payments. Obviously, that is a critical partnership, and we appreciate all that they do to make sure that we can reach their customers and provide the assistance that's needed. So as you know, we administer 4 different benefit programs, and this slide just tries to summarize that. So even though this is the EUSP operations plan, as the chairman alluded to, these programs work in tandem. We have a single application, a single point of processing for all the different benefit programs. And so even though it's an EUSP operations plan, it really does encompass the other benefit programs as well. So as you're well aware, MEEP is listed first there. MEEP is the Maryland Energy Assistance Program. That is our heating program, which is available throughout the year, applied as the one-time credit and funded through the federal LIHEAP program. The EUSP program, which is the subject today, the primary subject today, is there to help make electric bills more affordable to low-income families. Next is the Arrearage Retirement Assistance Program, available once every 7 years, between $300 and $2,000 in arrearages. There are some exceptions to that. We do provide vulnerable population waivers when customers are eligible for that, so they can get the arrearage more than once if they're in a bad situation. We've been funding that for some time through the RGGI dollars, through the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund, and we plan to continue to do that in the next year. And then finally, 2 years ago, 2019, we added the Gas Arrearage Retirement Assistance Program. That was following on the heels of the hearings related to the Arrearage Assistance Program and other approaches to arrearages. And we realized that while it's valuable looking ahead to discuss other ways to address arrearages, the biggest gap in arrearages in the state was related to gas arrearages. And we had piloted that some time ago, and we just implemented fully that pilot. That is paid for with the federal LIHEAP dollars. It's been greatly successful in these first 2 years. It continues to increase, and I'm very proud that we were able to implement that to ensure that folks weren't in a situation where they had their electric paid down thanks to these other programs, but then found themselves having their gas shut off due to significant arrearages. So this is just a snapshot of the 4 benefit programs, how they fit together. And I think it's important, particularly related to the chairman's comments in terms of how we manage funds in tight times. So right now we've got plenty of money. I'll get into that a little bit more. We have not seen a huge surge yet, thanks to the protections that were put in place by executive order. But we're fully anticipating being in a situation where we're going to have to closely monitor. We always closely monitor, but even more closely what funds are available, where we stand, and what we're using to pay for various benefits. So this is the flexibility we've arranged over the last couple of years. So we start with bill payment early in the year. We use EUSP ratepayer funds first. So those funds early in the year. So right now, those funds are being charged to the ratepayer funds. Those typically will run out in November, December. Then we'll start charging to the RGGI funds if those funds are available. And then after that, we move on to charging bill payment to the LIHEAP funds. We built that flexibility into the LIHEAP plan 2 years ago. Prior to that, the LIHEAP plan only had heating benefits allowable under that plan, but we had the approval to start building, essentially considering the bill payment plan a cooling program under LIHEAP so that we could charge LIHEAP for those bill payment. Now, why do we do that? We largely did that, as you are aware, the RGGI Strategic Energy Investment Funds have gone down significantly as the RGGI auctions declined in revenue a couple of years ago. So at a time where we were seeing $42 million from RGGI, we're down to 19 million typically today. So we need that flexibility in there, particularly as we look ahead to increasing demand. Next, the electric arrearage. We fund that to start the year off, and we plan to fund that throughout the year with the RGGI Strategic Energy Investment Funds. And then, if necessary, we switch to the LIHEAP funds. MEEP is always funded directly through LIHEAP, as is the gas arrearage. So I just thought this might be helpful to get a sense of how we ensure that there's funding available. We monitor closely all our balances and what we're paying, what we're charging benefits, which funding source we're charging benefits to at which time of year. The fund flexibility has really been important. Last year, it wasn't that necessary. In FY20, we charged $135,000 to electric arrearage from LIHEAP funds or MEEP funds, and we charged $313,000. Sorry, there's an extra one in there for bill payment. We expect that flexibility to be much more important in FY21. We didn't have to use the flexibility all that much because numbers, as we'll discuss in a minute, went down significantly once the protections were in place late in the year. So tracking of these funds are going to be really important as the surge comes, which we fully expect it to. Here's the budget breakdown that we're proposing to you today that was in the plan. I think this format just sort of gives that picture to the way we use that fund flexibility to ensure that funds are available for each of these programs. Now, the key thing on here is, of course, the CARES Act LIHEAP supplemental, that $19.4 million that has been awarded to Maryland from the CARES Act is going to be important this year, without a doubt. The only rules tied to it are that it has to be spent by September 30th, 2021. OHEP does not anticipate that we will be holding those funds until September 30th, 2021. We expect that these funds will be absorbing a surge in customers as we return to normal collection activities in the coming months. So overall, we do think that with this total of $151 million, there's enough to maintain the existing average benefits and absorb a solid 35–40% increase in the number of eligible customers in the next 12 months. There may be additional stimulus funds that come through in subsequent bills for the LIHEAP. If that's the case, and even if that's not the case, we're going to take stock as we move toward December or so. I think we'll have a better picture about how much money, where we stand with the number of applications we're seeing, and whether a supplemental or additional arrearage pay down is possible. I think especially if there are subsequent LIHEAP funds in these stimulus bills, then we can be looking at something like that, but we just don't know at this point. Something else I want to point out on here is just the transfer to DHCD for heating and cooling systems. $5 million doesn't seem a lot, but a couple of years ago that was a mere $2.25 million, and it was limited to heating systems. We've worked with DHCD. The department has to increase this incrementally and also add cooling systems to that. I think that's critically important. I hope we can continue to expand that so we don't have anybody on any waiting list. I think DHCD has done a terrific job this year managing that, so we've been able to replace cooling systems. Last week they were doing jobs up until the last minute on Friday so that folks could have working cooling systems in their homes during the intense heat that we experienced. So even though it's only $5 million, that's an increase from 2 years ago from 2.25, and that addition of the cooling systems is, I think, a really important thing, and something I'm happy we were able to do, and hopefully we can continue to look at that moving forward. So that's the budget overview. I would just note that the administrative costs align with the appropriation, the budget bills passed this last session, as do everything here. The only thing not accounted for in the bills is obviously the CARES Act LIHEAP supplementals, which came later, but that PCA has already been established. Everything's all set to deploy those funds right away. All right. So I want to take, before I get into the administrative and benefit details, I just want to talk about the pandemic response briefly. Let me take a sip of water here. So OHEP started with the issuance of that initial executive order. We started having these first of the month calls with stakeholders just to discuss the different plans to prepare for the transition, the resumption to regular collections activities. Now, every month, of course, the executive order kept getting amended, which we were happy about. I think from a customer protection standpoint, but I think it was a good platform. In some of these calls, we had over 100 participants. The participants came from the local agencies, from utilities, from commission staff, OPC. And it was really just a good platform to update. When I held that first call, I think it was just before April 1st. I think I probably had a lot of concern in my voice. We had seen a sudden increase in online applications following, the mid-March, the declaration of the emergency, etc. It was like a 400% increase year over year in online applications. But then as the executive order came out, and I think people started to absorb and understand that the accounts were protected, that there were no late fees, that led to a steep decline in applications. Applications for energy assistance just about stopped. Now, the fact is that April and May tend to be slower months anyway, but this was slow even by those slow standards. So, the protections have been terrific. We've tried to push out as many renewal applications as possible via mail, via email, and increased use of the redetermination process. So the redetermination process, just quickly, is a streamlined application process for fixed income households, about 20% of our total base. And this allows us to process the benefits with just a back and front letter signed by the applicant saying that nothing has changed in their household since the approval the prior year. So we've gotten a lot more of those out, trying to streamline that, essentially trying to process as many returning applicants as possible prior to seeing this new population come in. It's been challenging, largely because 50% of all our applications, and this counts for even returning applicants, 50% of all the applicants are accompanied by a termination notice. So that termination notice, as a driving force in submitting applications, cannot be understated. So without termination notices out there, applications have certainly declined. We do think Public Conference 53 will be very important to get a sense of really the scope of what we'll be looking at, and also to hear the plans for collections activities. We do hope that the lifting of any moratoria is sort of aligned with that conference so that we can all better plan. I think we have the money. I think the concern is, and has been from the beginning, just a sudden resumption of collections activities all at once, which then leads to that surge in applications, which would be difficult to handle. If the application surge is spread out over the course of 4, 5, 6 months, I don't think we'll have much difficulty in absorbing that. The concern is just that sudden return to normal collections activities all at once, leading to that sudden surge and backlog in applications. We've done a lot, as you know, in the last couple of years to reduce these bottlenecks in applications. So in the past, pardon me, in the past, we stopped processing applications on May 15th every year. And then we didn't start entering applications until July 1. Thankfully, we are not in that position anymore. We continue to enter applications year-round. So we're closing out one fiscal year, entering applications for the next fiscal year, and that allows us to keep things going. And the big idea behind that, as this slide demonstrates, was to get all those applications in the system so that July 1 we can, certify those, start making payments. So this year we started making payments July 15th, which was the earliest we've made payments ever, particularly for MEEP. So we made all utility payments July 15th for all those applications in June and July. But you see the decline. So we were at 27,000 some applications last fiscal year by the end of this month, by the end of July. And today we're just over 20,000. We might be inching up to 22,000 at this point. So all of that is really to say that the moratorium has been terrific. I think, people are facing such hardships, and it's incredible for them to have that protection there. But it certainly has led to fewer people requesting energy assistance to start the year. We've put out messaging around that, whether it's on social media platforms or linking into unemployment, the unemployment applications for the electronic application. So, we've been sending out those renewal applications, those redetermination notices, but we're missing that driving factor of the notifications. I do want to say, I think some utilities have done a terrific job of outreach as well during this time. BGE sent out 200,000 of our applications to customers they believed to be eligible, but had not previously received energy assistance. We haven't seen a huge uptick from that, but hopefully those folks are still in the process of submitting applications based on that mailing. SMECO did a terrific job in communications, sending out these pink letters just saying, hey, we're not going to turn you off, but please be aware that assistance is available. So, in that circumstance, our Southern Maryland applications have not dropped to the extent they have elsewhere. But obviously, we fully expect this trend to not keep up for much longer. It's just a matter of being able to manage the applications that do come in all at once. So I'm sure we'll discuss more on the pandemic response later. I just want to move into the review of our benefits, calculation of those benefits, trends over time, and so on. And of course, if you have any questions, you can interrupt me, but I'm going to move on to this. So I mentioned the end of the year decline in applications. That sort of exacerbated this downward trend since FY13. The economy's been strong over that period. We fully expect this trend to be reversed, going back to the days of 2010 and 2011, wherein we saw, over about 170,000 applications back then. I fully expect that we'll see, more than that over time. I think some of the data we'll see from PC53 will be revelatory and really help us get a better sense of what's coming down the pike. But we are fully prepared to absorb that 35-40% increase off of really 2019 numbers. So we're ready for that increase as long as it's spread out over time without significant backlogs created. Just comparing year over year, numbers were down. These were pretty even up until April. Total applications down 4.2%, MEEP applications 4.4%, EUP applications down 4.6%. We screened slightly more folks for the arrearage retirement and a lot more folks for the gas arrearage retirement. This is the second year of gas arrearage retirement assistance. I think people understand it more. And workers are able to communicate that better and to more effectively screen folks for the gas arrearage retirement benefit. In terms of the actual, there we go. In terms of the actual households receiving benefits, those declined even more precipitously. MEEP down 8%, EUSP bill payment down 10%, arrearage retirement down 24.2%. And that's a big number, but it's really a function of us screening more folks, and a lot of those folks having already received the arrearage retirement.
Here's we have a technical difficulty. We'll give this a minute to see. Oh, Mr. Freeman, you're back. I think we
Oh, I
lost.
dropped out.
You dropped off for probably the last 60 seconds. If there was anything you'd like to cover on that.
Oh, sure. I apologize for that. Hopefully my bandwidth sticks around. So this slide just shows the decline in those households receiving benefits. MEP down 8%, bill payment down 10%, arrearage retirement down 24%. That 24% number is a big number, but it's really a function of screening more households and then increasing number of households having received that benefit within the last 7 years or having an ineligible amount. And same with gas retirement. We're just we're screening more households for that benefit. I do want to talk a little bit about the decline in household receiving benefits. I'm going to get into denial rates a little bit later in some more detail, but OPC brought it up in their comments, and I'm always happy to look at this. We've been focused on these denial rates for quite a while. We've been focusing on, I'd say for the last 10 years, OHEP has been focused on processing efficiencies, right? So when you go back 10 years, the average processing time for an application was 68 days. We're down to 20 days on average now statewide. And that includes processing of all incomplete applications. So we're not talking about processing incomplete applications. That 20 days includes the back and forth and looking up all the verifications, doing all the screenings, everything from the Social Security screenings to the death screenings and all those. So we've certainly gotten a lot better on verifications, on ensuring that fraud is minimal. But that has led to, as the threshold for documentation has been raised time and time again, with higher denial rates. But in particular this year, we saw a surprising number of duplicate applications. So this 8% decline, of that 400% increase in online applications in mid-March, half of those were duplicate applications. So those were applications from folks who'd already received benefits in that year. It was very strange, very surprising, but obviously those end up being denied. As I mentioned, we'll be submitting a JCR, and I'm going to outline that JCR, that Joint Chairman's report that we'll be submitting on denial rates in a little bit. But as online applications have increased, the quality of applications has decreased. So if we have an application in paper form, we're only denying that application about 16% of the time. It tends to be of higher quality. The person tends to be more engaged. When we receive an application online, we end up rejecting about half of those simply because the information is incorrect. There's no documentation. There's no follow-up on that. So that continues to be a struggle as more folks log in, create accounts, submit those online, and then don't provide the required information to process it. We do struggle with that. And then finally, as I mentioned, the declines in arrearage are largely tied to the fact that a lot of folks have received it and they're eligible only once every 7 years. So I'll come back to denial rates in just a second. Well, I'm having trouble here. There we go. So this is the sort of 13-year view of the average benefit for bill payment and electric arrearage assistance, just so we know precisely what we're talking about. One of the things we do want to avoid, as you see, back in 2010, bill payment benefits were, coming off of a $688, $611 average. As the numbers increased coming out of that recession, we had to pull back benefits. So we lowered the benefit levels significantly, and that stayed low for the next 6 years. We've been able to start to boost those back up, get that average benefit to around $500 where it's been the last 3 years. I think that is a helpful level. I think our LIHEAP performance measures show that that is a level that does help households reduce their energy burden. And I think it's somewhat indicated on that decline in the average arrearage benefit as well. As you see, as the benefit goes up, the typical bill payment benefit goes up, that arrearage continues to come down. Now, I haven't done a full analysis of that decline in arrearages. Some of it is just that those households with higher arrearages have already received the benefit. I think this time period also reflects the deployment of smart meters, which may have some effect on lower arrearages because folks are being terminated more quickly. But I do think that higher bill payment is a factor in those declining average arrearages. So just back to my point there, I do hope that, we are not in a position of having to reduce those average benefits again because of an increase due to the recession. And that is why I brought up that fund flexibility earlier, that being able to work between the three different funding sources in a flexible manner, I think better prepares us to maintain average benefits even as demand increases significantly. So how do we calculate benefits? Just a reminder, I do want to say that most benefits are going to remain the same in FY21. That's our great hope. Our goal is to keep these benefits the same even as we absorb more households. All benefits are always calculated based on kilowatt hour usage, time average cost per kilowatt hour, times the utility index factor, and then the poverty level calculation. So it's a fairly complicated formula that takes multiple inputs, but I think it is responsive to the need. A lot of states are still closer to a flat benefit. This is a fairly responsive benefit matrix that Maryland has that has served us well. We are going to increase that minimum benefit from 120 to 150. As we look at performance measures, a lot of where we're not reducing enough is just on that low end of the folks who get the minimum benefit. So I think we can boost that safely by $30. On the MEEP side, we are going to reduce to ensure there are enough funds, but also because we're overperforming on our LIHEAP performance measures. We're going to reduce propane, oil, and kerosene by 10 to 15%. We're closing out the year right now. We're still taking in a lot of our bulk fuel supplier forms and closing out their accounts with them. And we still see, a lot of folks have a good amount of money on those bulk fuel accounts. So we think we can do this without really hurting anybody. Folks are going to be able to get through the winter with a slight reduction in the calculation of those benefits. We did put in place, just for context, a new wood coal pellets calculation so that we're approving for specific amounts of those commodities and not a dollar amount. I think the issue largely was that you can't purchase exactly $737 worth of wood. So we've put a new process in place to approve for the specific amount of commodity. We did have about 156 wood cases last year, so we still do small business in wood. As I mentioned, it's a dynamic formula for benefit calculation, and this does result in those of greater need receiving a higher benefit. So at the lowest end of the federal poverty level, 0 to 75% of the federal poverty level, you do see an average benefit for EUSP of $672. And then that goes down at the highest end, 150 to 175 at $364. Those in subsidized housing, we have continued, well, not necessarily this year, but we've ticked that up a little bit just to bring it up on par with the other benefits, because as we look at the LIHEAP performance measures, those in subsidized housing still do have an energy burden that is not necessarily covered by the additional resources they receive as being subsidized. And just to reiterate, the deployment of the CARES Act LIHEAP supplemental really meant that we could put out a seamless flow of all payments, meaning a July 1 utility MEEP release and absorption of all the new eligible May-June applicants, and $19 million. And we do plan on using those FY21 LIHEAP funds, to respond to any elevated level as we move toward the winter. So On to OHEP administration. I just feel like we don't often get to introduce ourselves or my staff. So I wanted to put up this org chart just briefly. We are an office of 6 strong. So locally, essentially at the Office of Home Energy Programs, the 6 of us take care of all utility payments, all program and fiscal compliance. We oversee all the utility and bulk fuel supplier agreements. We write all the policy. We develop and distribute outreach materials. We provide the training to local agencies. We process the critical medical needs applications. And we provide level 1 support for the OHEP data management system. So I know, hopefully, all 5 of these folks are watching on YouTube right now. So I want to thank them because they do an incredible job day in and day out. And when I consider what we've accomplished over the last couple of years with just the 6 of us, it's been quite profound. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. In terms of our administrative structure, and I'm going to go into some of the research we're doing in terms of refining and improving the way we do business out in the community. I brought this up in the context of MD Think in the past. And hopefully over this next year, we'll be making more progress toward that. So when you look at the other benefit programs in the state of Maryland, they are administered directly through those local departments of social services. OHEP is different. For historical reasons, we've been split between 3 different service models. So we've been operating through community action agencies, which are selected via RFP, and we establish contracts with them to provide services in those communities. We do have standing programs in some of these local departments of social services, the biggest being Baltimore County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County. And then we do operate through local governments in Baltimore City, which is the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, and then in Frederick through their Community Action Partnership, which is part of the government there. So you see the numbers as split between type of service model are fairly even. We do about 10,000 more on an annual basis in local departments of social services than in community action agencies. But the reason I wanted to bring this context up is just, I think if you look at this, there are natural inefficiencies in operating through 3 different models and operating in places that don't process the other assistance benefits offered by the department. We also have a separate data management system, right? So we have a separate database from all the other benefit programs, which means we're not sharing as much information as we possibly can. So when somebody in one of these agencies wants to double check something on somebody's SNAP case record or TCA, they have access to do that, but it is a much more complicated stage process. And so I'd remind the commission, I talked about MD Think, which is the Maryland Total Human Services Information Network developments going on. So MD Think is building a joint database called the Enrollment and Eligibility System, which will house all the benefit programs. Good news is that for most benefit programs that should be launching in October of this year, the bad news is OHEP is not yet a part of it. We do hope to be a part of that and to leverage that integration with some administrative model changes and some new approaches to how we do business. Now, we believe that the integration will help us better serve the customer in that they're having to provide less information, and that will result in not just better customer service and less frustration on the part of the customer who just provided their SNAP information. Now they've got to provide all their energy assistance information to a different set of people. But it'll also reduce those denial rates. It'll streamline processing. It'll lessen that burden. And then we really think it's going to have significant administrative impacts, right? Right now we have 286 workers across the state performing eligibility and enrollment work. That's separate eligibility work from SNAP, TCA, TDAP, MA, all those other programs. We can pull certain resources from those programs used for verifications, but there's certainly a duplication of efforts on both program and customer sides. So what we did, in the context of potential changes under MD Think, we engaged 11th House Solutions as a consultant to complete a scoping review and cost-benefit analysis of particular changes we're envisioning possible. And so I just want to take some time to run through this because I'm hoping that by the time we get to this hearing next year, we are starting to shift the way we do business. So the purpose of the research was to examine the cost and program effectiveness of potential administrative process and program changes made possible by the integration of energy assistance into this enrollment, eligibility and enrollment, or E&E system. We looked at two key things here. One was introducing categorical eligibility, and I want to thank staff, commission staff, for asking us to further define categorical eligibility following this hearing, and we're very happy to do so. A lot of the work over the next year will be refining and defining exactly what categorical eligibility is, but let me just take a moment to talk about that. So categorical eligibility is also known as automatic eligibility, right? So under LIHEAP statute, you can automatically enroll people in energy assistance if somebody in that household is already receiving SNAP, certain veterans benefits, and other public benefits. The idea is to simply streamline it so you're not having to re-enroll and re-screen that person over and over again. So for us, it would most likely look at the household level. If everyone in that household is receiving SNAP and they've done something on their case in the last 6 months, then we would automatically qualify them and use that income information to enroll them in energy assistance programs. That takes some changes to COMAR. It takes some changes to operations. And ultimately, the biggest change is, in order to do it effectively, we have to be in the same data system, the same eligibility system as the other programs to really make it work. So we undertook this review, and we looked at the 20 states that currently implement the LIHEAP categorical eligibility option, and the most recent data was 2018. And then we provided an assessment of the program impacts on the benefit recipients, administrative costs, and overall program performance. And then we undertook a review of all 50 states in the district with a primary focus on the cost effectiveness of insourcing and outsourcing the eligibility and enrollment work. So that means, are you doing it all as part of the Department of Social Services, or are you outsourcing various things to contractors to do that work? So let me run through this. So we looked at, really what we could make possible. There's a lot of challenges ahead in terms of the technical integration, but we talked a lot about how to make that work with staff on the ground, and I think we really recognized that the option was possible to fully integrate into MD Think E&E that would facilitate these other changes.
We may have lost Mr. Freeman again for a moment. Mr. Freeman, you're back with us.
I'm back. Okay. People are texting me that I froze. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it keeps going. So this reduction average benefit as it relates to the different means of providing those services. So the combination of contractors and government offices, contractors alone, and then government offices alone, with the implementation of categorical eligibility. Just briefly, there are challenges in comparing energy assistance programs across states. This is not like SNAP, which has uniformity and it has, strict federal oversight. Keep dropping out. Am I dropping out? Hello. Here, I'm back again. I
Yeah,
apologize.
we could hear you, Mr. Freeman. Yep.
Okay. I apologize for that. So just briefly, there are some caveats and to comparisons. This is not like SNAP. It's not uniform across the country. And there are options besides categorical eligibility for streamlining these applications. So while Pennsylvania, for example, does not have strictly categorical eligibility, they provide customers with the option of using income on file for other benefits such as SNAP to be used to qualify for energy assistance. So while that's not as automatic as what we would like, it still does allow for streamlining and may be an option moving forward. Other caveats, in many states, LIHEAP is the only energy assistance program available. Other states implement multiple programs. I'm sure you're aware of the Universal Service Fund in New Jersey and Maryland. We integrate LIHEAP with EUSP. And, comparing across states is challenging just because each of these programs have their own specific requirements and regulations. And that certainly changes the complexity of the application process and the eligibility process. But, we tried to carve as much of those differences out to compare apples to apples as possible. Some of the other things, many states don't run a year-round energy assistance operation. I just give the example here of Kentucky operating a LIHEAP subsidy benefit program in November and December, and then only a crisis program for the 3 months following. So obviously a program limited to 5 months is going to incur significantly fewer administrative expenses than a program that processes applications year-round. Which is, I think something we should be proud of, that we have these options available to us year-round, but certainly presents different administrative challenges and cost considerations. So the key findings really is that states that have implemented categorical eligibility achieve a lower administrative cost percentage and serve a higher proportion of income-eligible households. I'm not terribly surprised by that, but now we have it on paper and we have the numbers to back that up, which is welcome as we move forward with this. Regardless of a state's implementation of categorical eligibility, a model that incorporates government-run servicing centers as opposed to contractual or community action agency-run appears to provide the best performance relative to program costs and market penetration. So that essentially says insourcing gets you additional bang for the buck. If you combine the two, so insourcing along with categorical eligibility, that's where your greatest economies of scale are to be found. And converting all jurisdictions to government service model and moving to categorical eligibility, could have us on track to achieve that national median of 6.4% in administrative costs, which results for us a savings of $2.8 million per fiscal year. Which could be then redirected to benefits. So I wasn't terribly surprised by this study. I was glad we did it. Now we have these data there to back us up and to justify what we'd like to do moving forward. So what comes next? The rollout of MDThink's enrollment eligibility system for the other benefit programs is scheduled for October. We're waiting the go-ahead for starting to really dig in and plan. We, at this point, as an office, understand what we'd like to do and what we'd like to bring to the commission and the other stakeholders in terms of moving toward categorical eligibility and other administrative changes. We just need the go-ahead. MDThink is a huge initiative. Besides enrollment and eligibility, there's also the new CJAM system for child support, the social services database. So this is a big project. We are just a small little part of it, and I'm hoping that now that we've got this study in place, that the justifications are there, that we can continue to move through it. I have some concerns in terms of where the state's budget is. This money's not coming from OHEP. There's some federal funds in the pot and some additional state funds, and we'll have to see how that plays out in terms of if the funds are available to recreate us. There are options for a lighter touch, I think, if we get to later in this year, October, November, and we're not able to fully integrate into that enrollment and eligibility system so that it's seamless. then I think we can at least establish, APIs and other connections into E&E and start to pull more information directly out of that database to help us introduce categorical eligibility. But really, the next 6 months are going to be critical in sort of laying out where we're going to go with E&E, but also what results from it. So I'm sure we'll come back to some of those issues. I just want to address some of the issues and questions raised in the comments that were submitted. I thought a good way to frame this was just through our JCRs. We submitted 2 JCRs, 2 joint chairman's reports in FY 2020. The first is our typical application processing times report. We've been submitting that for years now. We continue to make progress on that. Average application processing times are down to 20 days on average. We've got a number of smaller agencies on the shore in Western Maryland that are processing applications in under 5 days. So I think our efficiencies have already improved significantly. The other JCR we submitted was related to participation rate funding. And this was something we worked on. We had a couple calls with commission staff. And I want to thank them for their help in some of these projections, and also Office of People's Counsel and MEA for looking at how much money would be necessary, right? Would be required to increase program participation to 50%, 75%, or 100% of the eligible population while providing EUSP benefits at the same levels. And I just stress that because and the utility in their comments noted that these numbers are different than what commission staff had put together in the EAP program back in the old PC 27 days. That EAP had a projection of $250 million on it at 100% participation. But we're looking at a very different thing here. So the requirement of the JCR was providing EUSP program benefits at the same levels. The EAP looked to reduce the household energy burden down to 6%, I believe. So that would be bigger benefits than what current benefits are. So these are the numbers we came up with, and then commission staff helped us estimate the surcharge and the C&I average increase should that ever be put in place. Now, I do want to go into a little bit about because participation rates came up both in the utility comments and also OPC's comments, and we're always looking at participation rates. And the idea of getting to 50, 75, or 100% is a challenge. I mean, we would need to fundamentally reshape the way we enroll folks and qualify them for enrollment in these programs if we were ever to come close to this. So right now, just to give the context, we're typically at about 26% in Maryland. In 2018, that was the 10th highest in the country. Michigan had the highest participation rate of 54.2. New York and Vermont were over 40%. And incidentally, our coldest county, Garrett County, they have a participation rate on par with New York and Vermont. They're well over 40%. We don't have that. We have disparate participation rates throughout the state. I think overall, being 10th in the country suggests a solid participation rate. I'm not sure exactly how 75% is conceivable without a much different approach to enrollment, a fundamentally different approach to enrollment than anybody's taking. So the first bullet point there just highlights the national IHE participation decreased from 20.5% in federal fiscal 2013 down to 17.3% in 2018. So, I think the context is important when we talk about increasing participation, that 75% is not approached by any state in the union. Another thing that was brought up, as I mentioned earlier, was denial rate. So in FY21, we're going to submit that application processing time, JCR, once again. And then we'll submit a new one on denial rates. So this has been requested of us to provide application denial rates by benefit type for EUSP, arrearage assistance, MEP, and gas arrearage for fiscal 19, fiscal 20, and wherever we stand in 21. So this is due in October. The most common causes for application denials separately for the different programs, the steps our local agencies are taking to work with customers to avoid denials due to missing documentation, and any changes in policy implemented in recent years or plan to assist in reducing application denial rates. So we have taken some measures. Our year-round processing of applications throughout June, late May and June, was really intended to reduce the denial rates of those applications early in the year, because in those cases we were holding some applications for 4 weeks before doing the data entry and follow-up. So right now we do that in real time. The redetermination process for fixed income households was intended to reduce denial rates as well. We haven't really seen great motion on the denial rates, and on this Joint Chairman's report, I'll certainly get into it more, the challenges of the online application and how we look to improve that, and perhaps integration with enrollment and eligibility will be the biggest driving factor in reducing those denial rates. Because if we have the information through the other benefit programs and we're not relying on the customer to provide income information, all the information for every member of their household, all that stuff that gets hung up, then we can certainly reduce denial rates. All right, I do just want to note, and I'm happy to answer more questions about this. I hope I didn't drop off. But as noted in last year's hearing, OHEP does not collect information regarding applicants' engagement with the retail supply market. We have no particular insights into the data provided through order number 89-215, the Able Foundation report, or OPC's report on retail suppliers. We've been engaged on the supplier consolidated billing work group. We're happy to work through those particular issues, and I'm happy to work with any group as we're looking at these retail supply issues. I did see Risa's letter come in late yesterday or the day prior. I think our stance is simply that we don't have any particular data. We don't collect information from customers about their participation, their engagement in the retail supply market. We don't store that data. We don't have it. As noted in one of the bill hearings this last session related to this issue, we do think that any changes to the approach just needs to be accompanied by education, thorough education, so that folks understand what they are getting into when it comes to whatever related to the retail supply market. So there was one bill this year, I don't have it noted right in front of me, but it would have prevented energy assistance recipients from enrolling with a retail supplier. And we didn't take a stand on that. We didn't take a position on that particularly. We just indicated that should that happen, it's to be accompanied by a robust outreach and education effort so that people understand what they are getting into. That's that. I'm sure OPC will speak more on the retail supplier issue, and others will. We just don't have all that much information related to that. So other issues that OPC brought up, I just want to quickly address. Yeah, we certainly do hope to expedite that additional improvements to operations to streamline processes and reduce administrative costs. There's nothing I want more in this world. Like I mentioned, MD Think is a big project, and we're a small piece. I hope we can move forward quickly over this next quarter or two to really see where we stand with all that. We're happy to provide OPC with more details on the outreach plans of local agencies. We review those plans. Outreach is largely driven by those local agencies based on the conditions and the population of their local jurisdiction. We provide the materials, we provide the context, but a lot of it takes place at the local level. We go through an outreach planning process each year with each of the agencies. This has been a particularly interesting year in terms of changing those outreach strategies, and we were getting plans back where people were thinking they were going to have events later in the year, and we had to say, you're probably not going to be having events later in the year. So we've driven a lot of that to electronic outreach, to reinforcing access of vulnerable populations, to making those partnerships with departments of aging, to making those partnerships with local elder care entities to ensure that those who are in facility, are in apartments and other places where they may be shut in, particularly now as sheltering in place continues, that they have access to those, and to really reinforce that local agency responsiveness to doing home visits during this time. We've, as I mentioned, we continue to target a lot of these activities to the new population who don't haven't really interacted with the benefits network as it relates to social services. I do think that the utilities and what comes out of PC 53 will be incredibly important in this. They, because these folks aren't known to the social services system, but are known to the utilities, I think the utilities will play a critical role in communicating with those newly eligible populations, because these folks may still not be coming to the department for SNAP. They may have gotten their unemployment, they may be surviving on that. So they may not be known to us to the extent that they are known to the utilities, and I hope that those partnerships flourish even more as we move forward into the next stage of the emergency period. And then OPC also brought up the issue of the call center. There's no doubt we continue to be in contact. We don't have direct oversight of the DHS call center, but I continue to raise the concern that the call center needs to be prepared to absorb an increase in the number of calls. Right now, we're at about 1,000 a month for energy assistance. That's just central calls to the 1-800 number. I expect those to go up to 5, 6, 7, 8,000 once we resume normal collections activities. We've had conversations internally about streamlining some of that. We've made some improvements to the script. We updated the desk guide that the staff there use. But there's no doubt that the call center has been stressed. I think any social services call center, could never have prepared for what we've seen over the last 4 months. But I am hoping that our ongoing conversations with them, and also the decline in the calls related to SNAP and the other cash benefits, which spiked back in April and May, will make room for energy assistance calls. After submitting the plan, commission staff did put out additional proposals regarding the USPP MEP waivers, which has been a hot topic for a while now. So I think we're meeting sometime in the coming weeks, and we're going to put together our comments on what was proposed there. And we look forward to kind of coming to a resolution on that, as it affects the utility certainly more than it affects us, but it affects our applicants, our customers, certainly. And as I mentioned, we've been engaged on the supplier consolidated billing. I think we've had some breakthroughs in the last couple energy assistance subgroups. So hopefully there won't be any issues with energy assistance as it relates to supplier consolidated billing once that is unveiled. So finally, I just wrap up, our only real concern, it's not money. It's largely handling the surge when the normal collections activities resume. And, we do hope the PC 53 will be accompanied by a further moratorium just to allow us to coordinate and prepare, because the worst case scenario is just the sudden surge of termination notices resulting in a sudden surge in applications, creating a backlog, which doesn't help anybody. So we know it's coming. We just want to spread that surge out, flatten the curve, if you will, to ensure that we can address the increase in demand over time. So thank you. That's all I have to present, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, for that presentation as well as the report, and our thanks to your your 5 team members. Obviously, it's a lot of work for a small office to process. If commissioners have questions of Mr. Freeman now, we could ask now, or we could hold them until we hear the other presentations. So if there's a question, Commissioner O'Donnell, I see your mic is on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had 3 questions for Mr. Freeman. I'm kind of sorry you took your slide deck down because I had a question on slide number 2.
Slide number 2. Okay. This one, sir?
No, that one.
Yep.
So in the how benefits are determined row, in the column under MEP, the very lower left corner, there's a bullet that says benefits are determined by geographic area. What is that? Could you expand on geographic area? How do you make a determination on geographic as a
Sure.
situation?
Sure, that's a very small factor in the determination of the MEP benefits. That is actually just a factor for Garrett County based on the number of heating days in the year. So there's a slight boost, particularly for oil, propane, and other deliverable fuels. It's based on the number of heating days in Garrett County. But
Okay, so
geographic doesn't play into any other area.
Okay, fair enough. I thought maybe it was a rural, urban kind of thing. I didn't know what that was. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah, just based on heating days.
Okay, second question. Who is the decision maker as to whether or not to incorporate OHEP into the MD Think platform? Is it DHR leadership? Is it Do It? Who is the decision maker as to whether or not you get in that platform?
So I do think, this has come up in the budget hearings related to MD Think and MD Think being close to being over budget and behind scale. So there's some legislative input on that, I think, going forward. And largely, we're at the point where we're working with the MD Think team to determine where we can fit into the schedule. I do think we're at that point of being able to fit into that schedule, and hopefully that when we come back to the budget next year, that the money's there. But I'd say at this point, it is largely the MD Think team decision of us fitting into their plans and what they can do going forward.
So help me out here, because I'm like to be very direct, and I also live by an axiom: never accept no from a person who doesn't have the authority to say yes. Okay, so again, who is the ultimate decision maker? Who is this team? Who is this? Who is it?
So the MD Think is led by the chief technology officer in the department. I do think it's been up to them to put us on the schedule. Obviously, the secretary would be signing off on that.
Okay, so it's internal to DHR.
Correct. Yeah, and until at least we get to that, until we get to the budget hearing. But I think at this point, it's still DHR level, DHS level decision making.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, very good. That's helpful to know. It's not some externality to the department. It's internal to the department. Lastly, I had a question regarding your request or your suggestion that we extend the shut-off moratorium out of PC 53. I'm interested in your thoughts. If you simply move the date, you just move the problem, and you have the same problem when that date comes, right? So there has to be a better way to meter out, flatten the curve, if you will, meter these shutoffs out instead of just moving a date, and then you have the same problem further down the line.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've struggled with this. This kind of keeps me up at night sometimes. Just what is the best approach? Obviously, we're not making decisions on this, but I put that in there just because my thinking at this point was I think we're going to learn a lot that will help us plan out of PC53, right? I think it's going to provide the foundation for collaboration between us, between the utilities, between other stakeholders to sort of work together to make that transition. I just, my concern is that if we're still having that discussion and learning about how everybody's going to approach this at a time when the moratorium's going away, and I think we're certainly going to see, especially the co-ops and the municipalities, be anxious to move back toward collections very quickly, and so we're going to see the surge there. Others like Potomac Edison have already said they're not turning off until I think September 15th. The only reason I brought that up was just to allow that space to absorb what's going to be learned through PC53. I share your concern with kicking the can down the road. As I noted, those notices are a key driver in applications. It's what gets people in the door. It's what calls people to action. And so without those, we've certainly seen that decline in applications. I'm hoping out of PC53, we do find that medium of a uniform communication going out that really is pushing people to apply for energy assistance when they need it now, so that we can spread those things out without launching, the regular collections activities across the board. So I'm of a mixed mind on that. I just feel like if we can absorb and work together out of PC53 with the moratorium, it would be helpful. But there are certainly benefits toward moving back to normal collections activities now.
So your shop, Mr. Freeman, does yeoman's work. You got 6 people, including yourself, and you're administering many tens of millions of dollars in program activity. And there's a lot of work going on there. I would ask you to continue to think along that line, something between simply moving the date, which just moves the problem further out but doesn't fix the problem, and how to meter that out. Continue that thinking in your shop. You do good work, but you're also, I hope, going to be a pivotal input into the PC53 process. And I don't think PC53 is going to deliver you the magic bullet, but your thoughts and input from your shop will be critical, I believe, in this regard. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Very thorough presentation, and I also want to just congratulate you on the great work that your team is doing, particularly right now under these circumstances. I kind of wanted to follow up just a little bit with Commissioner O'Donnell's question. I'm also concerned about the potential of a surge. And one of the things I picked up in your presentation, you talked about things that are being done now to hopefully kind of alleviate or to avoid that surge. And one thing you mentioned that SMECO is already sending out notices reminding people that if they're in arrears or if they're having trouble that they should be applying. I think PC53 is going to be important, but that's still down the road. I mean, should we be doing things now, urging our utilities to get those notices out there so that people, if they're not taking advantage of these programs, can make sure that they're not getting themselves in such a deep hole that it'll be difficult later on. It just seems like we may need to take action sooner than when we get around to this hearing.
I think any communications that can go out now from the utilities would be welcome. As I mentioned, BG sent out some 200,000 applications to folks who had not received energy assistance. That was a tremendous help. The SMECO mailings, I think, were very effective in just how they looked. You get a different color piece of mail, you open it up. It's not a turn-off notice, but it encourages you to apply. I think the more of that we can see, and I can't pretend there's so much going on right now to have a handle on every single utility mailing that's taking place. I think there are others who are out there doing that work. I think it is a critically important time before the resumption of normal collection activities to get those messages out there, or even as we move after a moratorium, to have stages of communications to encourage people to apply for energy assistance. My concern is not handling it over the course of the year. It's handling it all at once. And so whatever we can do to stage that out through communications and other measures, all the better.
Okay, great. Yeah, because we certainly don't want to have a situation like unemployment applications that the state is suddenly overwhelmed and people are left waiting. So
Exactly.
anyway, I was intrigued by when you mentioned that SMECO had done something that was successful. If maybe that is something that the other utilities ought to look at and again, try to avoid this surge. I also wanted to ask, just as I was reading through your filing about the point-in-time application process. Given the nature of this pandemic, a lot of people now may be in some financial distress, but many of our industry may suddenly go through a V, and they'll be back to work, but they will still be in this hole or still be in need. Some of these citizens may be in need. Have you given any consideration to again how you might approach some of these applications vis-a-vis the point-in-time application process?
So we have, yeah. So we have talked about whether it makes sense. Obviously, we're at the start of a new program year. So the point in time just relates to applications within that same program year, right? That we just want folks coming back, applying in July and then coming back to request arrearages in February, March. So we do have that waiver process for how to qualify for that. We have talked about getting rid of that and putting the parameters in the system to just allow, recognizing that folks may get assistance today, but have to deal with that arrearage in February or March later in the program year, and just getting rid of that waiver process. The reason it's in place is just so you don't have these folks coming back.
Yeah, understand.
Time again, yeah. It's to alleviate the work. So I do think we need to have additional conversations with our local agencies to see how they're ready to handle that with those folks coming back. But it is on the table in terms of getting rid of, for this year anyway, the point in time restriction. To say that you can come back later in the year, if you already got bill payment and MEP, you're not going to get another bill payment and MEP, but you can get arrearage later in the year on a new application.
Good. Because there could be people now that are just out of work temporarily, but will suddenly have these needs, be back to work, but still need these programs to help them recover from the situation. And then just two quick questions about just, would it be beneficial right now for OHEP to have additional information regarding on the bill assistance program? How much of that money is going to arrearages as opposed to trying to reduce the energy burden? Because it does seem like we have a purpose for the energy assistance that try to help people moving forward. But if a lot of that money is just going to arrearages, then it's not really giving them that boost on the energy burden. Is there more information that we should be helping you receive in that area? Thank
you for that question. I did note that I believe in the plan. I didn't bring it up in the presentation, but it's something I've brought up the last few years. I do think it would be incredibly helpful to have as much information as possible in terms of what is the exact amounts being applied from bill payment and from MEP to arrearages, so that we have a better sense of really how these programs are all functioning together. We did get some insights into that from the data request that Ms. Garofalo led as part of the USPP MEP waiver, but that was limited in context. I think the data request would just be what was received in that USPP MEP waiver data request broadened out to everything. But I do think it would be incredibly helpful for all of us and for policymakers just to see really, when we say EUSP bill payment makes bills affordable year round. Well, if your credit is split into 12 out of, say, the remaining $12 left, that dollar every month isn't really doing much to help you afford your bill going on. That was an arrearage benefit dressed up as a bill payment benefit. And I think we just need to have a better sense of that in terms of what's really being applied to past arrearages. Great,
that's helpful to know. And then finally, on information, I know you've stayed neutral on this in this area, but in the retail energy supplier topic, would it be helpful to have that information, the aggregate information that OPC laid out? Given that budgets are going to be very tight and maybe tighter going forward, should we be considering whether or not funds should be going for higher, paying an above SOS commodity when these funds are scarce, and also just some of these recent reports that there are certain suppliers out there that are targeting low income, and a lot of times they're using gift cards and these immediate sort of benefits over a higher commodity price later on. I mean, is that something that would be helpful, do you think, to the program to have that data?
It would be helpful to the program. I mean, I always err on the side of having more information overall. I think I've tried to just stay out of this by saying that, we're the eligibility and enrollment office. Our current model, right, doesn't consider the actual, and maybe this is something the commission wants to discuss further, right? When we're taking an application, we're not considering the actual rate that applicant is paying at that time, right? We still use a model that puts that matrix in place for the entire year. So we're using the data at that start of the year, and we're using utility indices based on the cost differences between the utilities, but we're not in real time, just because of the level of effort it would take looking at, okay, what is this person actually paying right now? We're not set up to do that, right? That would take a lot of effort to capture that actual cost. So that's in part why we stay out of it, because we set our matrix at the start of the year. It's not based on current rates that customer is paying. We don't collect that information.
Yeah, fair enough. And I don't expect you to be the ones collecting it. I was just looking at a broader policy question here.
Well, yeah,
would it be helpful to know if some of these money, the assistance funds, are actually going toward paying higher commodity prices than would otherwise be necessary, and what impact that might have on your budget? Would that be helpful to you as a policy?
I think it would. I think we certainly didn't oppose the bill that came in last session looking for more information on that. I think we did make a comment that we shouldn't be the ones analyzing that information. That bill, I believe, had us analyzing the information, which I don't think is our role necessarily. The reason I'm hesitant in all of this is I do think having all that information opens up a broader policy and regulatory discussion altogether that isn't necessarily an energy assistance discussion alone. But certainly, I would love to know, I think, from our energy burden targeting purposes and et cetera, what those numbers look like. I think it would be interesting and instructive for all of us. I just don't think it's limited to that energy assistance discussion.
Yeah, great, thank you. And does your I'm sorry, one more. Just is the advisory group a good body to look at some of these policies, or I'm just kind of where the right group would be to kind of take the information and then come up with some kind of a policy, such as I think it was suggested maybe a guaranteed savings program would be eligible, but other types of retail programs would not be.
That was, I think, the amendment at the last bill, right? The guaranteed savings program, that they could be enrolled with a retail supplier if it was lower. I think we could certainly take it up in advisory. I don't know if we're a formal enough group to produce well-written analyses out of that, but we can certainly take it up and be responsive to the extent that we can on those topics.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Freeman. And I think this is something that will be important. Obviously, it's important to the legislature, so I think we should be at least responsive to what some of the folks in Annapolis are thinking. So thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Freeman. Well, still good morning. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
At least virtually. I'm glad to hear that OHEP is still doing well and still operating on behalf of customers of Maryland. A couple of the topics I wanted to ask you a question about have already been covered, but one of them I think I'll go a little further on. It's on page 7 of your report. So it talks about the MEP USPP waiver. You specifically requested that that the commission basically provide the waiver for all of the utility companies, so that the MEP USPP connection is no longer yes, using your words, not there anymore, not because you believe that it's obsolete. Putting aside the question of how the regulation would apply to OHEP and the question of whether or not a waiver has to be requested by you or the utility, I'm curious about OHEP's position on the value of USPP as a whole. We've been receiving waivers on this issue for decades, and it's been a personal concern of mine for a long time now, because it's something I think that as from a regulatory perspective we need to address. I think 25 plus years of waivers would suggest that there's something there we need to take care of. But in all that time, I don't think we've ever had a presentation or a comment on it from OHEP, because in a sense, this is federal money that we're using, that we're telling utilities how to apply to accounts, and you're the agency that manages the process. So I'm curious about the value of USPP, and not necessarily the connection to LIHEAP money, but just the concept of USPP itself, which basically goes one of two ways. You either use all the money up front for a customer's outstanding bill, or you require that they pay some of it down, and then you allow that benefit money to be applied over an extended period of time.
Right.
So you really got those two options. USPP picks the latter over the former. So what is OHEP's opinion on the concept of USPP? Is there one option better than the other one?
I would start just by saying I think part of the issue, well, in terms of effectiveness, right? USPP, and Ms. Garofalo can certainly correct me on this if I'm wrong, but we've seen a steady decline in USPP enrollment over the years in terms of the referrals we're making to the utilities. Why are people choosing not to enroll in it? Perhaps they don't understand it. Perhaps they, don't think it's useful. I don't even know if we do a good enough job of explaining it to customers when they're asked about it. So it could be a little too complicated for folks to really pick it up. My comments are really geared toward the fact that when USPP was put in place, MEEP was all that existed, right? And I don't want to question the basic model of USPP, because those types of programs work and are effective in various places. It's just a question of revisiting the idea and the concept and the framework of USPP in a world where you have EUSP, you have 2 arrearage programs, you've got all these other funds coming in. And as I think we see with the data requests that Ms. Garofalo requested from the utilities, the application of that MEEP benefit is incredibly helpful to folks, because they're facing that immediate crisis, that immediate need, that immediate debt, and they want that money applied to that account. And for them to be able to have that, it is often more important than participation in USPP, in my opinion, because that wipes out more debt than they're ever going to take care of through USPP. They want to deal with it right then and there. And then I think it is important to look at, again, with USPP being constructed at a time where there was only MEEP. That's why MEEP is tied specifically to USPP, right? Because it was all that existed. I think to segregate MEEP out as that which is tied to USPP just doesn't make sense anymore, because how come, and to Commissioner Richards' question there about knowing how much money from these other programs is going to arrearages, that ties into this, right? How come I sign up for USPP and my bill payment money can go and pay down my arrearage to some extent, but my MEEP can't? And yeah, it's just a much more dynamic assistance environment than existed when USPP was put in place. And I think we have to kind of back up and relook at that framework. And I do think that's part of what we're going to be doing in this work group that we'll be meeting, I think, in August 6th or 7th.
Okay, so OHEP's thinking on this, then, and I'm characterizing it based on what I've heard you say, is that the consumers are looking to use this money more as a crisis assistance type of program, as opposed to a long-term bill maintenance type of program. Is that fair to say, just a broad general summary of
I think that's certainly what we've learned and what the data suggests over the years,
okay. All right.
for
Thank
better
you.
or worse.
Okay. No, that's a conversation for another day maybe, but but I think that's helpful for me at least, because that's, like I said, we've had a lot of years of these waivers, and even though it's kind of harsh to say for me now personally, I actually filed some of these when I was at BG 20 plus years ago. So I know it's been around for a long time. We've been asking for a long time. So, but I don't think I've ever heard OHEP present a comment on it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton. Now, with that last line of questioning, I do recognize we have so many different programs from MEEP to EUSP to USPP to bill assistance to rearages for gas, rearages for electric. Some of them you could get now, some of them once every 7 years. We have private sector funding like the Maryland Fuel Fund. We have federal funding. We have C funding that's declining. We have ratepayer funds, which seems like some of these programs would be on the hook of if we see declines in the other sectors, whether it be federal funding or C funding, REGI funding. So this is worrisome. I would think that if I was in the unfortunate situation to need some of these programs, at some point it seems like if you don't have your hand being held by a social services coordinator, you might need an attorney to navigate which of these programs you would have to file for, when, how much, and how quickly they'll work with the utilities to get the bill payment. So this is going to be a larger concern, I think, a conversation. I know the legislature has created some of these programs over a long period of time. Some of them conflict, some of them complement each other, but it's something we need to consider. At this point, we're going to take a brief break, 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 11:40 a.m., at which point we'll hear from our utilities, beginning with the Exelon utilities. So we're in recess until 11:40. We'll get started in about 1 minute. All right, we are back on the record in case number 8903. At this point, we will turn to the utilities, beginning with representatives from Exelon Utilities. If you could please remember to state and spell your name.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Christia Ravenel, CHRISTIA, last name RA, V as in Victor, ENELL, on behalf of BGE, along with Nicole Edmonds, NICOLEEDMONDS. Our comments largely speak for themselves, but I'd like to make 2 notes. First, in regards to the Maryland Energy Assistance Program waiver, the utilities have cooperated and responded to staff data requests and have consistently requested the start to the work group process. As was mentioned, staff has just established the first work group meeting for early August. I fear we will require an additional waiver as the heating season quickly approaches. As we advised staff after last year's meeting, any change would require that billing system changes be completed early enough to allow for those system edits to take effect prior to the next heating season. We are, however, glad to see movement. We'll continue to engage in the process and hope for a quick resolution. Secondly, there's no new reasoning provided in OPC's request that the electric and gas utilities provide third-party supplier data. BG and the other utilities have provided OPC with the commission-directed information for the past 2 years, as shown on page 18 of OPC's comments. Otherwise, BG has no additional remarks, but are available for any questions, and I'm sure PHI has some comments as well.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Segers, S-E-G-E-R-S, appearing for TEPCO and Delmarva Power. Also appearing with me is Miss Danielle Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, our Senior Business Program Manager for PHI. Mr. Michael Hoy, H-O-Y, our Senior Community Relations Specialist for Delmarva Power. And Miss Christy O'Hearn, H-E-A-R-N-E, our Manager for Customer Care for PHI. I have nothing to add in terms of our comments to what Ms. Ravenel said. Just responding to OPC's comments, I echo what Ms. Ravenel said in the sense that this is the same request that OPC has made over the past 2 years, and it's also the same request that the Commission has largely rejected. I would note that the PHI companies have, in fact, as we committed to during last year's of the proceeding, OPC, the number of customers receiving energy assistance who are on retail suppliers. We have provided that information for the past 24 months. We have provided that information in November of last year, and we updated that information at the end of last week. And then for the remainder of the information that OPC is seeking, as we discussed at the hearing last year, much, if not all, of that information is already available to both OHEP and OPC through the PHI agency portal. And we are more than willing to work with the agencies to help them get what information that they have, or what they need, I should say. However, if we were to be required to provide the data that OPC is asking, we would certainly be willing to do so. It's just that we essentially would have to design an IT solution to craft a query to run that regular search, and there would be a cost associated with that. So I have no further comments, but we are available if the commissioners have any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Thank you, Mr.
a
Segers.
question.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to ask BGE and PHI for Pepco and Delmarva. BGE apparently sent out applications to people who they believed were eligible. We didn't hear, Mr. Freeman didn't mention that PHI had done anything, so I'm curious as to whether PHI has done any outreach to try to address the surge issue that Mr. Freeman talked about, and also BGE, what kind of results and whether you're thinking about any other actions.
Mr. Rao, if you want PHI to go first.
Sure.
My understanding, Commissioner Herman, is yes. We have been sending out communications, and I'm going to bring up Mr. Michael, who can provide some more information in terms of exactly what communications have been going out.
Okay, we have done several things. One, we've reached out to churches to identify opportunities to participate in their virtual services or in their meetings with their congregations to see if they will allow us some time to talk about energy assistance and to see if we can set up further meetings with their members of the congregations to work out issues they may have concerning the balances on their utility bills. We have disseminated information through food banks and food pantries throughout our service territory concerning the availability of energy assistance. We've issued press releases about the availability of energy assistance. We've also provided information to our call center reps so that when they talk to customers that may need help, that they can refer them to appropriate agencies to get energy assistance.
Ms. Ravenel?
Yes. So at this point, we don't have any data that we pulled together. There are plans for the collections department to do proactive calling to customers in arrears. We've also provided information to the call center just in their scripts as well as press releases.
Okay.
And let me add one other thing I forgot. It's on my list. We're also preparing a mailing of postcards to customers that we feel may be eligible for energy assistance, and that will go out soon.
Thank you. Because it sounds like SMECO in particular had some success. So I hope that the utilities would be communicating with each other to determine the best, if somebody's having a particularly successful outreach, that perhaps there might be some lessons learned from those. So hopefully that kind of communication is taking place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Commissioner Herman asked one of the questions I had here, and that is, about outreach and now to try to make sure people are aware of these programs that are available and that they should be availing themselves now. So again, I just join Commissioner Herman in urging you to contact SMECO, find out why they're successful, why they're moving the needle, and perhaps you can get the same kind of results. I did want to ask both of you about the legislation that was meant to address retail suppliers providing services to the low-income community. Did you take a position on either of those? And it went specifically to providing the type of information that OPC is requesting. Did you take any position in Annapolis on those legislative actions?
Speaking for PHI, Commissioner, I unfortunately do not know. That is something I can certainly look into for you.
I would say the same for BGE. I wasn't involved with that.
You were not involved at all. Okay. I mean,
I'm not saying BGE wasn't. I personally was not.
Okay. But this is information that you could aggregate as is being requested by by OPC? I mean, would there be any difficulty? I understand it seems like anytime you get near one of your billing systems, it seems to cost us $1 million. But is there a problem with getting that information to OPC?
To my knowledge, no. It would just be creating the queries and providing that information.
All right, thank you. Mr. Seegers?
Yes, that's the same, Commissioner. I mean, as I've discussed before, and if you may recall, as I described in detail at the hearing last year, much of this information is already available to both OPC and OHEP through agency portal that PHI has. But if, as I said before, if the commission, if the commission does direct us to provide the specific information on a regular basis, we certainly do, though, it would, but I would be remiss if I did not indicate to the commission that there would be an incremental cost to it. I do not believe it would be in the $1 million that you mentioned, Commissioner, but there would be an incremental cost.
Okay. Yeah, no, it seemed like SMECO had no problem providing this information. So I guess I'm a little confused why voluntarily PHI and BGE can't do the same. But in any case, it seems like the legislature is interested in this, and you know, I guess I'll see where my fellow commissioners are. But I think I've definitely come around to agreeing with the OPC on this one. So anyway, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you to the representatives of Exelon. Are there any other utility representatives that wish to speak? At this time, we will move to the.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Jeffrey Trout. Sorry. Yeah. I did not file comments beforehand. I'd just like to speak to, are you hearing me? I think my screen has frozen.
It's a bit. Your screen is frozen. If you'd like to remove your camera but speak, perhaps that will help. Reduce your
that may, as soon as the swirling blue circle clears so that I can turn off my video, I will do that. If in the meantime you can hear me, I just want to speak to.
We could hear you.
Okay, great. And I'll put the video off as soon as I am able to. Right now, I'm getting a blue circle. I just wanted to speak to several of the questions that the commissioners have asked, so that they have information from Potomac Edison on those issues as well. First, with respect to outreach, Potomac Edison has been participating in the meetings that OHEP has been holding throughout this period. We've been communicating with OHEP and the other utilities. We want to thank Mr. Freeman for his setting up these meetings. And we've been aware from the outset that there was going to be a time when the moratorium would end and that there would be a surge of applications. And we've been actively reaching out to customers in many of the same ways that our peer utilities have been. We've reached out to them with social media. We've reached out to them with a bill insert. We did that in May. We've reached out to them through the postings on the company's webpage. We've done phone messaging directly to customers that we believed might need assistance. We have in the works an email campaign to the same population of customers, to the extent we have email addresses for those customers. So I think all of the utilities, through various different means, you know, not all of us used a pink envelope. All of us have been reaching out because we all see the same problem that Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Richard and Commissioner Herman have asked about, and we're all trying to engage our customers to be ready to deal with any arrearages, and just normal arrearages, but also any arrearages that accumulate as a result of the moratorium. That's the first thing I wanted to speak to. The second thing is that I want to agree with and thank Ms. Ravenel for pointing to the need for the work group, which the commission ordered be created in November, to finally meet, because I think we could have a more intelligent discussion about the MEP waiver issue and some of the points that Commissioners Richard and Linton raised about those issues if the work group had been meeting prior to today's hearing. But hopefully we will have at least one meeting before the utilities will have to file their annual waiver requests, and it looks like we will have to do that again this year. Finally, on the issue of energy burden, I just want to make the point that I think we are getting, we're having a failure to communicate about how the arrearage retirement impacts customers. Because if a customer has an arrearage and they're off service or they're facing termination, they need that arrearage retired. Because otherwise they're not going to have a future energy burden because they won't be on service. And likewise, if they've got an arrearage, but it's not an immediate crisis, if the MEP money isn't used in appropriate amounts in an appropriate way on a customer by customer basis, which is what we in the aid agencies do, thanks to the waivers that you give us every year. If we don't have that and the customer stays on service, well, then they're paying off the arrearage every month as part of their bill. So the arrearage is still very much a part of their energy burden. So whether you're still reducing the customer's energy burden, whether you pay off the arrearage up front or you pay it off over the ensuing several months. And when it's better to do it up front, it seems to me better to let us continue to be able to do it up front. And I know that we'll have a discussion about that in a few months when the annual waiver hearing takes place. But in the meantime, I'd like to try to start to get the conversation focused on the fact that when you retire arrearages, you do reduce the going forward energy burden on that customer. And so it's a misunderstanding to think that using money to retire arrearages somehow doesn't contribute to reducing the energy burden going forward on customers. It's just a misnomer. That's what I have. Hopefully you heard some or all of that, and I am available to answer questions. And I still have a swirling blue circle on my screen, so I can't turn off the camera, but I hopefully will be able to hear you if you ask me any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. Any questions from the commissioner? Okay. Thank you. I think there is a bit of a delay, more than usual, with this hearing, so just hang with us. At this point, we'll move to the representative from the Office of People's Counsel. Strauslander, your microphone is on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jacob Auslander. The last name is Ouslander. First name Jacob, Jacob, on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. I don't have a slide deck or anything prepared. And for the most part, the comments that we filed this year are similar to the comments that we have filed the past couple of years. We do understand that there are aspects of what we've included in our comments that may appear critical of OHEP and Director Freeman, but I would like to take this opportunity to say that OPC strongly appreciates all the hard work that Director Freeman does to administer this program, and we would especially like to commend him for his leadership during this COVID-19 pandemic. He has repeatedly reaching out to stakeholders and keeping us informed of his agency's plans, and we certainly appreciate that. We also appreciate the leadership that the commission has shown in its orders and directives, and the granting of the petition that resulted in the PC 53 public conference with the data that we've requested to make sure that we can make informed decisions moving forward during this pandemic. So, although there are certain aspects of what OPC has included in its comments that may appear overly critical, we do appreciate all the work that OHEP does and the close working relationship that we have with them. As far as the comments themselves, I think that they speak for themselves. I would like to note that the version of the comments that we filed on Monday did not have the data on the EUSP and MEEP participation in Potomac Edison's service territory. We have received that data since that time, and we filed a supplemental version this morning, showing that the participation rates in Potomac Edison service territory are more or less the same as residential customer participation in retail supply in that service territory. We included that information, and we've repeated our request for the aggregated billing data that SMECO voluntarily provided. I do, appreciate and recognize that, as PHI pointed out, and BG&E pointed out, and RISA pointed out, the information that we presented is essentially identical to the information that we presented before. That we don't have any new information to support our request, but we can continue to believe that it's good public policy to gather the data that the commission could find useful in making a public policy decision when it comes to the participation of EUSP customers in retail choice. And OPC's position overall has been that public policy decisions should be data driven, and so we would not want to make a request for a specific policy decision in the absence of data. And we do believe that what we've been able to show so far with the data that the commission has ordered the utilities to provide to us does suggest that a closer look is warranted to determine whether or not EUSP customers are essentially having a higher energy burden than they otherwise would because of the aggregate prices that they're paying to suppliers. I'd also like to briefly note that I believe in RISA's letter, they mentioned that OPC didn't serve a copy of the comments on them. And I checked the service list this morning, and I don't believe that RISA is on there. And I think that probably explains why they were not served a copy. I've asked my assistant to forward them a copy of the supplemental version of the comments that we filed this morning. That really shouldn't affect their position. And I would just add that if they wanted to be served a copy of these sorts of documents, if they could just be added to the service list, that's what my assistant uses to to send that material out. And with that, I'm available for any questions that the commission may have. But as I said, what we've essentially filed is the position that we've taken in previous comments. And I know that the commission has not always agreed, with the wisdom of pursuing this issue of EUSP participation in retail supply, but we continue to believe that it would be a wise public policy choice.
Thank you, Mr. Auslander. Appeared that you reused some of the comments from last year, but you added a few new issues on call metrics and COVID, which I believe Mr. Freeman attempted to respond to in his opening comments.
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a perennial issue and a few additional ones to consider. Do commissioners have questions of Mr. Auslander? Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Auslander, you heard just a moment ago that Mr. Seegers from PHI said that a lot of the data that you're looking for would be available free of charge. Have you tried to access that data, and is that correct?
No, we have not tried to access that data, and I believe I addressed this this notion in the comments that we presented last year. There's a couple of problems with, it might be possible, I guess, if we had a list of all the EOSP participants to go in and manually look up each one and add up all of the charges. But I pointed out a couple of problems. One is if we don't have permission of the EOSP customers, as a policy matter, my office would not look up information regarding a customer's account. Even if we did theoretically have access to the data, we would want affirmative consent by those customers to look up the data. And then the other problem would be, I guess, the practical problems that would come in, and I suppose we would have to hire additional staff to perform that calculation. And one of the concerns that RISA has brought up is the concern that they have regarding the confidentiality of their pricing data. And we believe that what we've asked for, what we've asked the utilities to do, and what SMECO has provided to us is an aggregated, an aggregated dollar amount, and it doesn't go into individual customers' prices. It really is the aggregate billing figures for all of those residential customers served by retail suppliers, which we believe makes the concern with confidentiality of pricing information moot. We'd also like to point out that I'm not sure what what OHEP's position would be on delivering a list of even if OPC could get a way and change its mind on looking up pricing data without permission. That there's, I guess, the question about whether OHEP would even provide us with that information. So realistically, that suggestion is workable, and I think it actually causes more problems than it would solve. And I do want to, because you brought up PHI's comments, I do want to mention that the idea that this would cost $1 million is actually not accurate.
Well, that was that was a snarky comment from me. So okay.
Because we actually did ask, because we're obviously very concerned about price, costs and price impact as well. And in last year's comments, we actually included the figures that the utilities provided to us, and I believe that it was most of the utilities were coming in the range of around $30,000 to provide the database query that we were after.
Okay, that was going to be another question. You would be okay if there's a cost to getting this data, and I guess I'm taking it from you now that there would be that would be okay with OPC.
Yeah, I guess keeping in mind that $30,000, especially for a utility operating cost, is
right.
A very small cost. I mean, obviously, what everything that the utility does costs money, and we wouldn't be asking for it if we didn't think it was important. And we don't believe the costs make that prohibitive.
Okay. One thing you just said prompts another question. You said you're concerned about the confidentiality of the ratepayers. Obviously, if we were to order it, we wouldn't be, getting the we wouldn't be getting the consent of the ratepayers. Is that a concern?
I think
same concern if we ordered it.
I think it might be a concern if we were getting like the individual, like if we knew, Miss Smith paid this much. But I think that when we're at, because we're really just looking at the big picture, it's the sort of data that agencies typically want to have to make an informed decision. And there really is there wouldn't be any personal identifiable information. We wouldn't know the identity of any of the customers that would be actually participating. We would just be aware and cognizant of the actual aggregate charges that were being billed, and to take that information back and with the other information that we have about the program to see if there aren't potential decisions that should be made to really get at the core function of the program, which is to make home energy burdens manageable and to make electricity bills affordable in Maryland.
Okay, fair enough. You brought up confidentiality, and I took this as being aggregate data. So anyway, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do other commissioners have questions of Mr. Auslander? Seeing none, thank you.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I have a question. Thank you. Mr. Auslander, I asked the companies this, and I'd like to ask OPC to explain what kind of outreach you've been doing to help avoid the surge that Mr. Freeman was talking about. If you could give us a brief discussion of what kind of outreach you've been doing at OPC.
So the role of outreach at OPC is actually is taken up by our new director of consumer assistance, and I know that we have issued press releases, and we've worked with other agencies in our network, but I don't actually have specific details other than to mention that the did file the petition with the commission to start gathering data so that we could have the information that will be important to manage the impact of the pandemic on the utility bills that customers face. But I'd have to get back to you as far as specific.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
I know poor Mr. Auslander's not, he's got all these legal matters he has to deal with. I should have given a shout out to Brandy Neeland, who's the director of, what do you call them, consumer assistance?
Yes.
She's done a tremendous job from the OPC side in helping coordinate outreach. I think her efforts have resulted in some 40,000 plus flyers being printed and really being distributed throughout a network that extends even well beyond OHEP's reach. We've been in constant conversation with her about the outreach efforts. They've used the OPC email lists to organizations that are outside our network to get the flyers out there and to get applications out there. So really OPC's help has been incredible in the first months. And I want to thank Ms. Neeland in particular for her enthusiasm and her efforts to push it beyond the OHEP network. I think it's been a tremendous push by OPC on that.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, we'll hear from our final presenter of the day. We'll hear from Commission Staff Counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Oof, no. Can you hear that?
Yes, Ms. Garofalo.
Okay. It says muted no matter what I do. So, good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. That's ANNETTE Garofalo. G as in George. ARO. F as in Frank. ALO. As discussed in our comments, staff supports OHEP's proposed plan and expenditure of ratepayer funding. We do share OPC's concern regarding the amount of the benefit for bill assistance, which has not substantially increased over the past years, despite either steady or declining enrollment. However, we note that OHEP is currently spending more than the total ratepayer funds available under the program, and it is difficult to see how any more could be done on that issue without a change in the current legislation. Staff believes that OHEP's current spending approach is well-founded and diversified and is an attempt to meet general energy assistance needs. OHEP has fully participated in various rulemakings and meetings over the past year, and we thank them for that. If you have any, we did ask for more information about Maryland Think, and I think Mr. Freeman addressed that. That's really all I have on this issue, but I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Garofalo, you alluded to a potential need for a change in current legislation. Could you expound upon that? What are you talking about?
Well, under the current legislation, ratepayer funds are $37 million. And OHEP is spending on bill assistance alone a larger amount. I have covered up their chart, but let me just double check here. In the coming fiscal year, well, I'm not quite right. They're going to pay $30,781,000 and some change on ratepayer assistance, but that plus what is the other work that they're doing, not for customers, but for but for the complete for administration and other things is quite a bit more. If you if you look at their chart and follow down to the bottom, you can see that total bill assistance monies will be $58,251.889. So that's almost twice as much as can be collected under the statute, and that's being spent only on bill assistance. And so what I mean to say is it would be ideal if each customer could get a larger EUSP benefit, but that in total on bill assistance, OHEP is spending much more than they would be able to spend if they didn't work with their funding in the way that they do, using the RGGI funds, using in this case, they have using some MEAT money and other funds. So that's really my point is it would be nice to have a bigger benefit, but in total, if you look at the spending on bill assistance, it's a very large amount.
Yeah, I think that budget analysts in legislative services will probably scrutinize that in the upcoming fiscal year's budget submittal, but it's still not clear to me what specific legislative change would need to occur specifically.
Oh yes, I'm not suggesting a specific legislative change, merely that they must operate within the confines of the EUSP legislation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Garofalo. A couple of parties today have suggested that they're working with the staff on the USPP waiver work group. I was wondering if you could just give us a very high-level update or a summary on what's happening with the work group, and if there's anything you have to just tell us about what the progress is so far.
So, well, as you can tell, we need to spend a lot of very careful attention to this because the parties are very they were very excited, exuberant, but in a bad way when they talked to you about this. So what staff has done is we've issued 2 data requests and analyzed them in an effort to see exactly where is the money going. We have drafted a proposed set of regulations for discussion. And as you may remember, the utilities themselves came with proposed language, which consisted of just getting rid of the waiver or the necessity for a waiver. So we have had internal meetings and we are going to meet in August. We've had a number of work groups going on, and I think this one is going to need some special attention, but I don't think it will take long. But I've been wrong before, but
well, you're not alone in that group. Okay. In terms of collecting data, has there been any thought to what the data that's collected from the utilities during the what I guess I'll refer to as the COVID period skews or impacts any conclusions or policy decisions the commission could make going forward? I mean, certainly if you collected the data a year ago, it'll look a lot different than what you collect going back to, I say, March of this year from now until then.
This was pre-COVID data. And okay. I think that going forward, at least my goal would be to devise regulations that would work post-COVID. They may not work during the COVID period, but I'm hoping, I'm an eternal optimist, I'm hoping this is like a once in a lifetime, at least in my lifetime, thing, and then it will end, and then we would have something that would make the money that MEEP makes available for winter heating available to the customers who qualify for it during the winter heating season, rather than to pay arrearages that were accumulated in a previous period.
All right, well, I'll agree with you 100%. I'm hoping it wraps up soon. I look forward to the work group's end result and report. Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. Thank you, Mr. Jeff.
Thank you, Commissioner. Heard a lot of commentary today. Obviously, the report has a lot of information that the Commission needs to consider before rendering judgment. I'd like to thank all the parties who participated and reviewed the OHEP's operational proposed plan. These are unprecedented times. We'll have challenges. Director Freeman and your 5 staff will be working very busy. Maybe not so much now, but in the very near future, once we figure out what's going forward in terms of moratorium caps being lifted and a transition forward. I agree with you that PC 53 will be an opportunity for all relevant parties and the utilities to figure out how we best manage this process going forward, because it's more than just kicking the can. Bills need to get paid at some point in the future, and the lights need to stay on at the same time. So with that, the Commission will take the filings of the parties, including the filing made by Office of People's Counsel just this morning, under advisement, subject to a future order in case number 8903. With that, this hearing is adjourned.